it's Alberto Lombardi. Welcome to my channel. There's hundreds of tutorials on YouTube on how to play Pink Floyd's The Wall iconic solo. Why am I doing another one? Well, most of them don't get into the details of why this solo is so great. And spoiler alert, it's not just about the notes. And even there I would like to point out a few things. In this lesson I will show you how to play the whole solo, but I will also give you 10 secrets that will help you play not only the right notes, but also have the same kind of feel, timing, touch and details as the original. And at the end of the video we will try to solve a mystery about one of the licks and see one little mistake that David Gilmour did but left on the recording. And of course we will try to understand how he created his tone in his own words, and I will show you how I replicated it. So stick around with me until the end, and meanwhile don't forget to like this video, comment, subscribe and ring the bell. Okay, so here's the first lick. This one is pretty easy. But if you play it like this, it sounds like crap. What you want to do is give it a little swing. If we slow down the original recording, let's check it out. It's not straight, it's swing. This is the right feel, which is not straight 16 notes. Taka 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 ta. It's more taga 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 ta. And if you don't know what it means, I will link a video right here. You can click and check out my tutorial on Little Wing, where I explain the difference between swing and straight. The first one is a pull-off. And the rest is all picked. Another thing that I would like to point out is you don't have to play all the notes as loud as possible. Give it some dynamics. Then we go into this little double stop. We take this position, it's 3 notes. But we first play this 2. Then we add an A note with an upstroke, and then we play this 2 note with another upstroke. So it's not, it's more. Then we go into the infamous 2-tone bending, which is one of the most difficult parts of the solo. That's why it's easier to do on a Les Paul with 9 strings, because it has a shorter scale and you can bend easier. Still, this got 10s and not 9s, so it's a little harder. So you first bend 1 tone, stop the strings with your right hand, release a little bit of the bending, and then do the 2-tone bending. And then release. But it's really important to see where it is on the time. Caracà. There's like a funky attitude. It's not straight on the beat. Many people play it like 1, 2, 3, caracà, which is not right. It's on the upbeat, right before the beat. It gives you aggressiveness. You gotta be very careful with the intonation of these 2 notes. Try to get them perfectly in pitch, as close as possible, because otherwise it really sounds like crap. You might notice that this time around Gilmour picks the 2nd note of the 2-tone bending, but later on in the solo he will play it again twice, and both times he will not pick the 2nd note. So everything will be left to the sustain of the guitar. Then we have this little lick here. In this case, Gilmour doesn't vibrate at all. So it's like the beginning lick. So we have a pull-off, and then we bend, but this time we reach the pitch and stay there, don't vibrate. Can you tell how many details we already uncovered that are really part of the reason why the solo sounds so amazing? There's so much going on. And right at the end, it releases the bend a little bit. Now we change position, and this lick is very important. Many people play it here, but I've seen David Gilmour himself played it many times at the 5th position. Which is fine, both positions are good, they work, but I think it sounds more like it's here. The lick starts with a little rake, which is playing the strings without any note, hitting this F that is only note that has a sound, the other ones are dead. So we play the F with a rake, pull off, and then we do this little thing where we slide to the 7th position and end with a G. Then possibly it switches again to the 10th position. I say this because of the sound, I cannot be sure. It sounds like this note is a little fatter than this one. This is the perfect lick to tell you something really important. That's my third secret. Gilmour was heavily influenced by blues players, and when you hear blues players, their hands are never stiff on a note. It's never... You want to keep your hand moving gently around the notes, even if you're not bending. So the notes have some floating, and that gives them a human touch. They don't sound like a keyboard. But let's hear David Gilmour himself talk about it.
You do it absolutely all the time, a little bit, so that every note, is just the tiniest little things, which is what makes the guitar sort of so personal.
The lick that comes next is pretty easy. It's at the 10th position. Not much going on here, but the touch and the intention of this thing is very impressive. For the starters, this little part at the beginning is very short. This note is very short. The other ones ring a little bit more, but the first one is so short, it's really nervous, I would say. That is perfect for the theme of the song. And the last note is actually a pull-off. And right at the end of the pull-off, you just bend a tiny bit, which is typical of the blues. This is the little mystery I was telling you about, but we will discuss this at the end of the video, so stay with me. As for now, we will play it the way David Gilmour himself plays it live, which is like this. And then bend. What you want to do is you want to have these 4 notes like it's 30 seconds notes. They're in time. It's possibly unintentional, but it sounds so great because they're spaced out. It's not like you go... It's more... So it's like a rhythmic figure, a proper rhythmic figure. And I clearly hear this note on the record. Let's hear it. So what you want to do is you bar at the 10th fret, you mute with your palm, so you let this D note ring a little bit, but you mute all the rest. Then you play this E note, shift to the 13th fret, upstroke and bend. Release, and then two very short notes, nervous as we said. Another very important thing, many people just do this. And it doesn't sound right because what you want to do is you want to have an upstroke on the last note. Because it separates the last two notes and it gives them more punch. And be careful to separate the last two F notes. They're very short. And here's my fifth secret. The 2.5 tone bend, which is difficult in itself, actually is even more difficult because it's a very specific rhythmic figure. If you listen closely at a slow speed like this, you can see that at the end the phrase is actually really precise. Let's play it with notes without bends. So we have this figure and we want to respect it as much as possible while doing the bend that is really hard. At the end of the line, you can hear that he hits a couple of strings without any sound, just like ghost notes. This is something that he's starting to do now, and he will do it a lot of times later on the solo. So what you get is actually a percussive interruption of the phrase, which is very rhythmical and interesting. Here's my seventh secret. The long pentatonic lick that comes right after actually has a note that nobody notices because it's very subtle, but you can hear it on the record if you slow it down especially. And there's actually another note that I think is unintentional. Let's see. So, we start with the bend, typical rock blues lick, pull off like in the beginning, this time we pre-bend, and then we release. This little phrase, you want to bend the F like in the blues, like it was a little blues band. Then the next lick is actually a small bar. So you hit two strings and then pull off both strings. This is the note that nobody is actually noticing because it's kind of very quiet. And we finish with this two pull-offs. Okay, I will play it again. So check out how the notes are not always played at the same volume. Some are soft, some are loud. This little ending phrase, where I hit the strings, it's actually where I think most people think that this is the phrase that David Gilmour plays. Actually, I think his intention, so it's just a guess, because it's an intention, was just to hit the strings, and he accidentally fretted an F, which sounds good. So this note is actually possibly unintentional. When you slide down here, actually finishes the phrase with a downstroke on muted strings. As I was telling you before, this adds a little funkiness And now we get into this little phrase that has a lot of movement in it. It's on the 5th fret, but it starts with a slide. And be sure to separate all those notes. It's not, it's more like staccato. This little group here can be played in two ways. The first way is that the E note is on the beat. But I don't think that's his intention, and this makes a little bit of a difference. The note on the beat is actually the F, which makes this E note just a grace note. It's not a triplet. It's not what it is. It's more like... So basically, this is a little faster, and this note, the F, gets on the beat. So then we have another pull off. Then we play the C note and we bend it. You can bend down or up. And then we bend the F. During the whole thing, you should move your hands a little bit, like we discussed in the beginning. And try to alternate the dynamics. Don't play all the notes loud. Now we have the two tones bending again, but this time we will not pick the second note. Be sure to vibrate at the end. And just do a little release before going up to the two tones. So this rake seems like the one that we just discussed, but it's not the same. This time is more like a very fast sweep across the strings, like this. But we do hear these two open strings, especially the B string, ringing underneath. But as we did before, we want to play the G note with a downstroke going down, like this, then hit an upstroke and bend. Then we have these two little notes that are very short, very staccato. Actually, it's three notes, but the first one is muted. Here's the ninth secret. This lick sounds like this. Many people do this. That is not, in my opinion, what David is doing. It starts from the F, slides up until the D at the 13th fret with the third finger. But then, David is not intentionally playing this E note. He's actually hitting the string without any noise. I can imagine that what he wanted to do was this. But because he moves his hands a lot and he has these little subtle dynamics, what he ended up with is this, which is actually an E note, but it's an harmonic. This sounds like the record to me. This bending goes on and on. You can hear it in the distance up until it releases and goes to the next part of the lick. I suppose that what David wants to do was, but he didn't quite get the pull off. Remember that most of his solos start like an improvisation, then he can work them out, he can tweak them here and there.
I have a number of processes, and one of them is to just pick up the guitar and play, and see what comes out of the very first take, and often quite a bit of the substance of it will come out of the very first take.
But maybe he wanted to do this. Or maybe that was his intention all the way. But we will never know unless David calls me. Please, David, call me. Then we move up until the 18th fret and we do one whole tone bending. And this bending finishes with a very fast vibrato, which gives nervousness to the song again. Then we move up 2 frets and do the same thing. And vibrate again. Then we have these 2 little that are so subtle and so fast and staccato that they're really giving us the sense of the solo going to end, and they flow perfectly into the next part. Listen to this. And where they are on the beat is also important. It's funky, again, it's not static, it's not on the downbeat, it's on the upbeat. And I saved David's mistake for last. He starts with this. And then he hits the strings again. So it's 3 notes. But the last one is a little bent, like in the blues. Strum. And then he slides this position here. But he doesn't play all the notes. What he does is not really important. The important thing is that he's not playing all the notes all the time, all at the same level. He's modulating his touch to make it more interesting. The exact notes are this. And at the end, he moves his hand and unintentionally hits this E note, but that's not intentionally, just moving his hand. I won't tell you what the mistake is. You say it in the comment if you know what it is, and I will tell you in a little bit. But now let's go on with the lick. This time, when he does, he actually does a little pinch harmonic with his finger and his pick. He does 2 strokes without any notes, so ghost notes. And possibly the last note is not intentional either. He's doing the same thing. He's always doing like banging on the guitar like this. Then you have again a couple of strums with muted strings. And this last phrase when he does a slide from the flat 5 to the 4th. And this is picked a little louder than the rest, that it sounds almost slapped. Okay, it's now time to try to solve the mystery together. We're talking about the first rake, which is the one that was with 30-second notes. This one. Actually, if you slow it down to a certain extent, you can tell exactly what notes he is playing, and there's something strange. Let's hear it. So the notes that I actually hear are which are kind of impossible to play at that speed, especially if you try to do that bend. I can do that. I think it's almost impossible. So I have 2 possible explanations for this. The first one is that what I perceive as a bending is not actually a bending. So it's starting here and is sliding. So while the slide happens, he has the time to go through the B string, hit the E string with his third finger, and so we get this. And this is how I played it in my performance. But I have another possible explanation. We always hear David say that he does improvising over the track, and usually the first take has the bulk of all these ideas. But he does play many times, maybe 2 or 3, and then he might combine some of those ideas. In the digital era, it's quite easy. You record different playlists and you combine the pieces that you like. In the analog days, what we used to do is that we had different tracks on the multitrack machine return to different channels on the console. When you want to switch between 2 performances, you have to mute the one that was playing and unmute at the same time the one that you wanted to kick in, or punch in, as we say. What I think here could have happened is that David played this lick in 2 positions. The first one was here, maybe something like this. And another one, like he plays it now, and he possibly liked the second one more. But, and here's what's interesting, they might have switched between the 2 takes, the 2 performances, getting the first part of this one and the second part of this one, which gives us the sound that we hear on the record. This is just a guess, but these are the notes I hear. And here's the mistake. He's playing on a Dorian kind of feel, which is typical of rock and blues, but we are on a B flat major chord. So this note here just doesn't belong to this chord. And that's a little mistake, but it's so fast that nobody has noticed probably, or the feel of the solo was so good, so right, that nobody cared. So here's a little bonus about the sound. Let's hear David Gilmour telling us what it did.
The sound of it was this gold top Les Paul. Ezrin wanted me to play it direct inject, i.e. straight into the desk, without amps at all.
Okay, so he just basically plugged his guitar directly into the console and then heavily compressed it. So I did the same thing. I plugged my guitar into my interface, which is my console, and this is the result. Not bad, right? But David wasn't happy with the result, so he did another thing.
They liked it, Bob really liked it, as it was, but I didn't think it had quite enough meat to it. So I persuaded them to let me run it out through a DI box backwards into an amp in the studio, off tape, and then so it would come out through a guitar amp, and we added the guitar amp sound a bit to the DI sound.
Exactly. So what I did is replicating the same system, sending via an aux, which is this one, which is in pre-fader, which means that whatever I do to the fader on the console, it doesn't affect the amount of signal that is going out from this aux. And the aux goes directly into a virtual amp, which is this one. Very simple, basic, old Sans amp that is going to be blended underneath the original signal. Let's hear it by itself first. A little too aggressive, but if you blend it with the original signal, what you get is this. Which is very close to the original tone. I scooped a little of the 300, boost a lot of 2K, 5K shelving, and remove a little bit of the 100 cycles. With a touch of reverb, this is how it sounds. Thank you for staying with me. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Ciao!